Meet Ella, a 72-year-old grandmother from a small southern city who's lived a quiet life raising her family. But one day, during a peaceful protest, everything changes for her. Have you ever stood up for something you believe in, only to be pushed down? In today's story, Ella faces that moment, and what happens next might surprise you. Before we continue, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Please drop it in the comments so we can bring more stories that connect with you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. All right, let's dive into the story. It was a hot afternoon in June, down in a small city in Georgia. The streets were busy, but not with cars or shoppers. Today, people were marching. About 200 of them, young and old, walked together holding signs that said things like, "Justice now," and "Stop the violence." They were protesting police brutality after a young man in their town had been hurt badly by an officer just a week before. Everyone was angry, but they kept it peaceful, chanting, singing, staying calm. Among them was Ella Washington. Ella was 72 years old, a little shorter than most, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a simple blue dress and comfortable shoes because she knew she'd be walking a lot. Her face had wrinkles from years of hard work, raising 3 kids alone after her husband passed, cleaning houses to pay the bills. But her eyes? They were sharp and kind. She carried a small sign that said, "Enough is enough," written in her shaky handwriting. Ella wasn't loud or pushy. She stayed near the back of the group, marching slow but steady. Her grandson, Jamal, was up front with his friends. He was 19, tall and strong, and he'd begged her to come. "Grandma," he'd said that morning, "you always told me about the marches you did in the 60s. We need you now." Ella had smiled, patted his hand, and said, "Okay, baby, I'll be there." The protest moved through downtown, past little shops and a park. People watched from the sidewalks. Some waved, some just stared. Then, near the courthouse, a line of police officers showed up. They stood shoulder to shoulder, wearing heavy gear: helmets, vests, shields. Most of them looked serious, but one officer, a white man named Officer Daniels, had a smirk on his face. He was maybe 40, tall and broad, with a loud voice that cut through the chants. "All right, folks, time to wrap it up," Daniels shouted, stepping forward. "Go home before you cause trouble." The crowd didn't stop. They kept walking, singing louder. Ella stayed quiet, holding her sign, her feet aching a little but her heart strong. She'd seen this before, cops trying to scare people away. Back in 1965, she'd marched for voting rights, faced dogs and hoses. This wasn't new to her. Then, it happened. Officer Daniels moved closer to the group, his eyes scanning for someone to pick on. He spotted Ella, small, old, an easy target. He stepped right in front of her, blocking her path. She stopped, looking up at him, her sign trembling in her hands. "Move along, lady," he said, his voice mean and loud. "You're too old to fight. What are you even doing out here?" Ella didn't flinch. She took a deep breath and said, "I'm here for my grandson, for all these kids. I've been fighting longer than you've been alive." Daniels laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Oh, you're a tough one, huh?" he said. Then, before anyone could react, he reached out and shoved her. Not hard enough to knock her down, but enough to make her stumble back. Her sign fell to the ground, and she grabbed Jamal's arm to steady herself. The crowd went silent for a second, shocked. Then the yelling started. "Hey, what's wrong with you?" someone shouted. Jamal stepped forward, his fists clenched, but Ella pulled him back. "No, baby," she whispered. "Not like that." People had their phones out now, recording everything. The video was shaky, but you could see it clear as day. Daniels pushing Ella, smirking like it was a game. Within minutes, that clip was on X, spreading fast. Comments poured in. "This is disgusting." "Who is that cop?" "She's just an old lady." "But here's where it gets real." Someone in the crowd recognized Ella. A woman named Keisha, who worked at the library, gasped and said, "Wait, that's Ella Washington. She marched with Dr. King." Keisha ran over to Ella, still holding her phone. "Miss Ella, are you okay? I can't believe he did that to you." Ella nodded, brushing dirt off her dress. "I'm fine, honey," she said. "Just mad." Keisha posted online, "Y'all, this is Ella Washington. She marched in Selma 1965, fought for our rights. And this cop just pushed her like she's nothing." She tagged news stations, activists, anyone who'd listen. By nightfall, that post had thousands of shares. The next morning, Ella's story was everywhere. Local news showed up at her little house, a brick place with a sagging porch. Reporters asked, "Miss Ella, did you know you'd go viral?" She smiled softly and said, "I didn't march back then, for cameras. I did it 'cause it was right. Same reason I was out there yesterday." Turns out, Ella wasn't just any grandmother. Back in the 60s, she'd been part of the civil rights movement. She'd walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, when she was just 13. Scared, but brave. Newspapers from back then had her picture. A skinny girl in a white dress, holding her mother's hand as police loomed nearby. Now, 60 years later, here she was again, facing the same fight. The video of Daniels shoving her lit a fire. Protests grew bigger, not just in Georgia but in cities across the country. People carried signs with Ella's face, saying, "Protect Ella" and "Justice for all." Hashtags like Ella Strong trended online. Jamal couldn't believe it. "Grandma," he said, "you're famous." Ella just chuckled and said, "I don't need fame, I need change." Meanwhile, Officer Daniels was in trouble. The police chief held a press conference, looking sweaty and nervous. "We're investigating," he said. "This isn't who we are." But people weren't buying it. They wanted answers. A week later, the department announced Daniels was suspended, then charged with assault. The crowd outside the courthouse cheered when they heard. Ella didn't. "Stop there." She started speaking at rallies, her voice soft but firm. "I'm not here to hate anybody," she'd say. "I'm here so my grandkids don't have to march like I did. But if they do, I'll be right beside them." Young people listened, inspired. One girl, a 16-year-old named Tasha, told a reporter, "Miss Ella makes me feel like I can fight too. She's so strong." By the end of the summer, the city council passed new rules. More training for cops, a citizen review board to watch them. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Ella sat at home one evening sipping tea, watching the news with Jamal. "Think it'll last, Grandma?" he asked. She looked at him, her eyes tired but hopeful, and said, "It'll last if we keep pushing, baby." And that was Ella Washington, a woman who'd seen the worst and still chose to stand up. Not for fame, not for cameras, but for the people she loved, and the ones she'd never meet. So that was the story of Ella Washington, a grandmother who turned one push into a push for justice. What did you think of her courage? Let us know in the comments. Did it make you feel stronger too? If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. It's free for you, but it means the world to us. Thanks for watching, have a good day, and we'll see you in the next one.